Hello everyone and welcome back for some more Drag Race gossip, secrets and drama. So I'm back for a new series of my Have Your Say video where you get to vote on whether you agree with the outcome of Drag Race. Today's video is for All Stars 9 episodes 1 and 2. So we'll be recapping both episodes, going through the results of the Have Your Say poll, and I'll be talking about a bit of drama involving Trixie, Mattel and Violet Chachki, as well as some other news involving James Ross, formerly known as Tyra Sanchez. All that and more coming up in today's video, so let's get started. Okay, so let's start by recapping the episodes, and we'll of course start with episode 1. Also, because it was 2 episodes in the premiere effectively, and we're recapping 2 episodes, I'm going to try and keep the actual recap part pretty short. Let's start with who the cast are, and we'll say it in order in which they came into the workroom. So first we have Got Mick from season 13. Then we have Roxy Andrews from season 5 and All Stars 2. Then we have Vanessa Vanjie Mateo from seasons 10 and 11. Then we have Angeria from season 14. Next we have Nina West from season 11. Then we have Plastique Tiara, also from season 11. Then we have Georges from season 14. And finally we have Chanel from season 1 and All Stars 1. In terms of the cast, I actually really like this cast. I think it's very varied with lots of different types of queens. I think you've got some people like Roxy and Chanel who are kind of drag legends because they've been on some of the older seasons. They're quite well known within the Drag Race fandom. And then you also have comedy queens like Nina. And then you have some really good fashion queens like Got Mick and Plastique, who I think are going to kill it on the runway this season as well. So I quite like that there's quite a diverse group within this. So this is a much smaller cast than normal, but we found out, and it also was rumoured for quite a long time before the season, that there are going to be no eliminations this season, and also they are competing for charity. And this has been widely discussed whether no eliminations is a good thing or not, and if you've watched my most recent Roscoe's, you'll have seen that Naysha did say that she had heard from other people that apparently for All Stars 8, which was obviously the one that Naysha was on last season, apparently a lot of queens were saying no to All Stars, and that's why Drag Race had to then create this idea for having the no eliminations, because they were actually finding it hard to find queens who said yes. And I think I can see both sides of it. I can see why the queens would want to go back and not have eliminations, because it is a lot of money that the queens have to spend to be on the season and pay for the outfits. And so if you then go home first or second, you don't really get to show any of that. So it is a huge investment. So I can see why the queens would not want eliminations. But they have introduced this twist, which is kind of interesting, I think, to keep the season a bit interesting because there are no eliminations, which is similar to All Stars 7 when they did the Platinum Plunger to block someone. This season, they are competing for benefactress badges, and then the person who has the most badges at the end has a chance to win $200,000 for their charity. And then for this season, they're using the scissors to snip or cut someone so that they can't win a benefactress badge the next week. So I think they are trying to make it a bit interesting, and they're trying to make up for the fact there aren't eliminations. And for me personally, I do actually quite like the fact we're going to see all of the queens every single week. I do think not having eliminations does take some of the suspense out of it, but ultimately I think if the queens don't want to come on because they don't want to spend all of that money to then just get eliminated, ultimately without the queens there is no show. So we do have to accept that I think this is the fairest way for the queens to compete. So the mini challenge for this week is the reading challenge, and I thought this reading challenge was really good. It's probably one of the better reading challenges we've had recently because some of the previous season's ones were not very good. I thought all of them had at least 1 or 2 really funny jokes, and a few people really stood out. For example, Got Mick and Roxy Andrews I thought had really good reads. And Roxy is announced as the winner of the reading challenge. And we find out that the main challenge for this week is that the queens have to write a verse for the song Drag Queen Save the World. Okay, so now let's move on to the performances in Drag Queen Save the World. I'm not going to go through every person's performance because it would take too long. I'll just talk about my highlights. I think for me, the person that stood out the most in terms of the choreography and the way they looked was definitely Plastique. When she got carried in by those dancers flipping her ponytail, that was just so cool. And it really was a show-stopping moment. I also really loved Angeria's verse because I think she definitely has that stage presence, but I also thought the lyrics themselves were probably the best of all of the queens. And I don't think anyone did badly in this. I do think that some queens, I found it quite difficult to hear the actual lyrics they were saying because the music was so loud, but then other people were quite loud and you could hear them. So that was a little bit of an issue for me, that there were queens I personally just didn't quite connect with their lyrics because I just found it so difficult to hear them. But maybe that's just me going deaf in my old age. But overall, I think everyone actually did really well. I don't think there was anyone that did badly. So this was a pretty strong performance for all of them, I think. Okay, so let's quickly move on to the runway for this week, and the category was Signature Look, Signature Fragrance. So first was Gottmik with the fragrance Crash, and Gottmik described it as an unprovoked fragrance that's dangerous and really spiky, perfect for a casual night out or the jewel at your local Renaissance fair. Next we had Nina West with the fragrance Criminal, which Nina described as an exotic fragrance that's as funny as it is illegal. She also said there are intoxicating top notes of library books and sour hip pads. Then we had Fantastique by Plastique, which she described as a scent that will transport you to a realm where dreams come alive, and it evokes a sense of being embraced on cloud 9. Then we had Angeria Paris Van Michaels with Le Southern Belle, which she described as being the fragrance for a saint who wants to feel like a sinner, with top notes of peaches and moonshine and bottom notes of cornbread and collard greens. Then we had Miss Vanjie with Toxica, and she described it as being a fragrance that will intoxicate and penetrate everyone with one squirt. And she said, this crunch fragrance is as hyphy as it is contagious, and it evokes a sense of tweaking at the club. Then we had Little Chiquita by Georges, and she said it's a scent that will leave you gaping for more. And this dank ass fragrance is as tiny as it is spicy, with top notes of VCR cleaner and a hint of marijuana. Then we had Chanel with the fragrance Chanel No. 1, which she described as a scent that delves into your darkest senses. This luxury fragrance is as hypnotic as it is elegant, for the diva who wants to feel like a temptress. And finally, we had Roxy Andrews with the fragrance Never Sent Home. And she said it's a scent that will make queens never want to send you home. Wear it when you want someone to save you over guys like Alyssa Edwards and Tatiana. Perfect for the struggling or incompetent queen. And as usual, I'm not going to critique the fashion because that's just really not my thing. But I will say my favourite of all of these looks was probably Chanel. I thought I just really loved that silhouette. I thought the colour was amazing. I thought her fragrance looked incredible. And although I thought Plastique did look amazing and it was so incredible, that outfit with the wings was amazing, I did think that Chanel overall had a package that I just thought was the most cohesive, and I really loved both the fragrance and how it matched with the outfit. And we find out that the top two for this week are Angeria and Georges. Although I do agree with Angeria, I was slightly confused about Georges, although I can understand that she did choreograph the number and she was also good in the performance, but I did think that perhaps Plastique was going to be in the top instead. So Georges and Angeria then lip sync for the win to $1 Million Baby by Whitney Houston, and Angeria is announced as the winner. And I do agree because I think Angeria did maybe capture the essence of the song a bit more than Georges did. So then Angeria has to decide who she wants to snip or cut, or in other words, stop them from next week earning a benefactress badge. And Angeria chooses to cut Roxy Andrews. And this was a smart move in my opinion because Roxy is incredible competition. She's very seasoned, but she's also good at so many things. And we all know that a design challenge is probably likely going to come, and she's a very good seamstress. So I think this was a smart move on Angeria's part. And so that means that Roxy can win next week, but she just won't win a benefactress badge. Okay, so let's move on to episode 2. So the queens come back into the workroom. Roxy then comes back in. They obviously have that little bit of banter and sort of fake shade towards Angeria for cutting her. And so we find out that the maxi challenge for this week is a ball, and it is the paint ball. So as usual, they're going to serve 3 looks. The first category is monochromatica. The second look is drag imitates art. And for the third look, the category is paintball eleganza, which is the self-made look, where the queens have to start with a blank canvas and then they have to do some kind of hand painting to it. I thought this was a really interesting challenge, and it must be really difficult because to actually paint something if you're not actually that good at painting is probably really difficult. So I can see that this is a really, really big challenge, especially for the queens that aren't exactly designers. I'm not going to talk too much about the queens actually working on their outfits. It's pretty much as usual. Some queens are doing very well and then other queens are struggling. Okay, so let's go through the looks for the ball. As usual, it's just really not my thing to comment on fashion and critique it because I know nothing about it. But what I will say at the end is who I thought had the best overall package and who had the best self-made outfit. So I'm going to go through each category in order in which the queens appeared. So first of all, we have the category of monochromatica. And first up, we had Angeria in the colour Neon Galaxy Green. Next, we have Chanel in Kinky Pink. Then we had Roxy Andrews in the colour Ravenous Red. Then we had Gottmik in the colour Donatella Purple. Next we had Nina West with the colour 2 in the Pink. Then we had Miss Vanjie in Michelle Green. Then we had Plastique in Gambon Crimson. Then we had Georges in the colour Kush Green. Okay, so moving on to the next category, which is Drag Imitates Art. So first up we had Angeria, and she was inspired by Mondrian. Then we had Chanel inspired by Hokusai. Next we had Roxy Andrews inspired by Salvador Dali. Then we had Gottmik inspired by Edward Munch. Then we had Nina West inspired by Tom of Finland. Then we had Miss Vanjie inspired by Vincent van Gogh or Vincent van Gogh. Next we had Plastique Tiara inspired by Yayoi Kusama. And finally we had Georges inspired by Picasso. And then moving on to the self-made outfits, which the category is Paintball Eleganza. And first up was Angeria, and she said her look is a beautiful ombre lime green to yellow gown. Then we had Chanel, who said that her outfit is Las Vegas meets Cirque du Soleil meets Avatar. Then we had Roxy Andrews, and she said she's serving these huge wide legs with an ombre effect. Then we had Gottmik, who said that this gown is Galliano punk rock, and it's high fashion artistry. Then we had Nina West, who said that she's feeling her true paintball fantasy and looking like she was actually hit by paintballs. Then we had Miss Vanjie, and she said she has her blonde hair on and she's looking like Miss Puerto Rico 2024, and she's painted with the Puerto Rican flag and crown. Then we had Plastique Tiara, who said she's serving a hand-painted and stoned dress with a long 20-foot train, which is covered in cherry blossoms. And finally we have Georges, who said she has her skirt on that she stenciled for hours with puffy sleeves and also a little cutesy brassiere. And overall, I think all of the queens did really well, actually. I don't think anyone did badly, although obviously there were some queens who maybe didn't quite do as well. For me, I do think that Gottmik probably had the most consistency across all three of her looks. Each one was really, really incredible. But I do think that Plastique was just that level above, because I think that her self-made outfit was just so impressively beautiful, and all three of her looks were incredible. And we find out that, unsurprisingly, Gottmik and Plastique Tiara are the top two. Gottmik and Plastique then do a lip sync to the song Jump in the Line by Harry Belafonte. And I think this is actually such a cool song, and I did read online that Harry did unfortunately pass away quite recently, so I don't know if they used this as maybe a little bit of an homage to him. But this is a really cool song. I just think that perhaps these two, it's not quite their vibe. I think it's more of a comedy type song. But I do agree, I think Gottmik did slightly perform the song more to the style of the song, because she did do slightly more comedy, whereas I think Plastique would have been better in a song that was a bit more energetic. And we find out that Gottmik won the lip sync. And then we find out that Gottmik chooses to snip or cut Angeria, who was last week's winner. And this does make sense because Angeria is the only one with a win so far, and she is definitely big competition. So I think I would have made a similar decision and chosen Angeria as well. And that was it for the 2 episodes, so now let's move on to the Have Your Say poll results. So obviously, because this is a slightly different setup, I have changed the questions, and I'm also obviously going to run through it for both episode 1 and 2. And because there were quite a lot of questions, I'm not going to stick too long on each individual result. So question 1 was, in episode 1, who had the best entrance look? And we had Gottmik in first place with 38.9%, which I do definitely agree with, she looks stunning. And then we had Chanel with 25.5%, which does make definite sense. And then third place was Plastique Tiara with 19.6%. Question 2 was, in episode 1, who was the best in the reading challenge? And unsurprisingly, we had 66.7% for Roxy Andrews because she did win, so that is totally fair. And then we had in second place Got Mick with 24.4%, which again does definitely make sense. Question 3 was in episode 1, who had the best song verse? And although this was quite close in some ways, Angeria Paris Van Michaels came out number 1 with 32.2%, and this was followed by Plastique Tiara with 24.7% and Vanessa Vanjie Mateo with 15.3%. Question 4 was in episode 1, do you agree with the top 2? And this was pretty split with 57.4% for no and 42.6% for yes. And based on the comments, which we'll come to later, I think most people thought that Plastique was going to be in the top 2, which is potentially why no got more votes. Question 5 was in episode 1, who do you think won the lip sync? And this was a pretty solid majority for Angeria with 85.6%. And I do agree, I do think Angeria did better because I think she performed the song more in the style of the song. Question 6 was in episode 1, who would you have cut? And we had Roxy Andrews with 49.2%, who did actually get cut. So that does make sense because she is a big threat. And then we had Got Mick with 15.2% and Nina West with 14.9%. And I can see why people would say Nina because she's a comedy queen and there are going to be acting and comedy challenges. So she is also quite a big threat in that regard. Okay, so moving on now to the questions about episode 2. Question 7 was, in episode 2, who had the best self-made outfit? And with a huge majority of 73.2%, we had Plastique Tiara, followed by Got Mick with 17.2%. And I definitely agree, as I said earlier, Plastique's outfit was just so well made. It was literally mind-blowing to think that she made that in that amount of time. Question 8 was, in episode 2, who had the best package overall of the 3 looks? And we had Plastique with 57% and then Got Mick with 36.7%. Question 9 was in episode 2, do you agree with the top 2? And this one was a pretty landslide, 91.8% for yes and 8.2% for no. Question 10 was in episode 2, who do you think won the lip sync? And it was Got Mick with 60.9 and Plastique with 39.1. And as I said, I do think that although the song was not quite in the wheelhouse of these two queens, I do think Got Mick did slightly better overall because I think she captured a little bit more of the energy of the song. Question 11 was, in episode 2, who would you have cut? And this was actually pretty split between two people. So we had Nina West with 44.1% and Angeria with 38.3%. And finally, question 12 was, who is the frontrunner so far, or in other words, most likely to win the competition? And this was quite interesting because it was pretty split between a few of the queens. So we had Angeria with 28.1%, Plastique with 26.7%, Roxy with 20.8%, and Got Mick with 20%. And I think that does make sense to an extent because Plastique, Got Mick, and Angeria have all been in the top so far. And Roxy, although she's not actually been in the top, I think she's been seen as quite a fierce competitor, so I can see why she's also quite high up there and people thinking she's going to win. But let me know in the comments who you think is going to win the season. Okay, so let's move on to the comments for this week. So quite a few, as you may expect, and I did mention this earlier, mentioned that they thought that Plastique should have won episode 1. And I do agree, as I said, in my opinion, Plastique looked so great during the performance and I loved the choreography and the hair and being picked up. Obviously the picking up part, I'm not sure if that was Plastique's choice, but it was so amazing and no one else really had anything like that, so she really stood out. But she was also great on the runway and her performance itself in the verse was also solid, so I do agree that I think she should have at least been top 2. The next topic that came up quite a lot in the comments was people saying that they thought Chanel has had no screen time, and someone said they thought that the editing was weird and rushed. In terms of the Chanel thing, I do think she has not really featured as much as I maybe thought that she would, given that we know Chanel is such a big personality, and on season 1 she was so fierce and she clapped back at Ru very famously. So I was thinking they might show a little bit more of that, so I don't know if that's deliberate or whether maybe Chanel just wasn't quite giving as much the same energy, but I would love to see a bit more of her because I feel like she was kind of not present in the edit. And then in terms of the actual format, this has obviously been quite a big topic about the charity element of it, but also the no eliminations. Overall, quite a lot of people said that they don't like non-eliminations because it takes away some of the stakes. But quite a lot of people said they did like the format because it gives the queens a chance to show everything that they brought, but also it means that the queens don't have to worry about something that normally would send them home, so maybe they have a bit more freedom. And I can see that, and I do think it's probably ultimately a good thing that there are no eliminations, at least for the time being, but I can't see Drag Race doing future All-Stars with eliminations now. I think this is probably going to become the new normal. But let me know in the comments what you think about this. Okay, so now let's move on to a little bit of light drama this week that involves something that Trixie Mattel and Violet Chachki said on the pit stop this week. So at the beginning of the episode of the pit stop, Violet said, quote, "These bees need to shave, sacrifice something for your art." And then Trixie said, quote, "That's how I feel about the bearded drag queens."
These need to shave, sacrifice something for the art.
That's how I feel about
razor burn.
That's how I feel about the bearded drag queens.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm like, girl, we all look like
you want to be hot as a boy,
yeah,
don't
thank
you?
After the pit stop aired, multiple people then started talking about these comments and criticised Trixie and Violet for saying this about bearded queens. Several Twitter users then posted this clip, including this Twitter user who said, "Tag your favourite bearded drag queen." There was also another post that retweeted this clip, and the post said, "Saying this in 2024 is wild." Many people defended Trixie and Violet in the comments and said that they were clearly joking and that their comments about bearded queens were probably not meant seriously, and some people were just making jokes about what Trixie and Violet had said. However, other people criticised Trixie and Violet and said that their comments were discrediting bearded drag queens and feeding into negative stereotypes of what drag is. And for example, a Philadelphia-based drag queen named Eric Jaff tweeted seemingly in reference to this situation and said, "In 2024, I don't feel the need to explain my validity or femininity to anyone. If you need to tear people down to make you feel better about your outdated conventional idea of what drag is, I hope that makes you and the other mole people happy." And as I said earlier, this clip has caused a lot of discourse about the stereotypes in drag, with many people voicing their criticism for Trixie and Violet and accusing them of discrediting bearded drag queens. Whereas other people defended Trixie and Violet and said that this whole situation has been blown out of proportion and was probably meant more as a joke. But as of now, neither Trixie or Violet have addressed this in any way, so we'll have to see if any other developments come out about this situation. There was also some other interesting news that happened this week to do with James Ross, or King Tyra, previously known as Tyra Sanchez, who is the winner of Drag Race Season 2. So you may have seen that James has had a few run-ins with the law over the last few years, and I have talked about this in previous videos. Well, it appears that James may have actually helped recently to get a police department shut down. There was a recent article published about this story in Action News Jax, which is part of WJax TV, which is a Jacksonville, Florida-based TV station affiliated with CBS. According to the article, back in May 2023, James was involved in a car crash, although the crash was the other driver's fault, not James's. And some body cam footage from the police officer emerged, and it showed an exchange between an officer and James. I'll play a short clip of the footage, which I found on an article by Entertainment Weekly, but I can't play the whole video due to copyright. But just to give a bit of context, the footage starts with the police officer arriving on the scene. They briefly speak to the other driver, who said that they had slightly bumped into the back of James's car. And from the looks of it, they had presumably pulled over and were waiting for the officer to arrive. The officer then goes over to James's car, and this is then what happened.
I'm here to help y'all, okay?
Okay, well, hurry up and give me my accident report.
Why
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Look, you can drop the attitude.
Let's do it. Let's do it. So we can
go. You can calm down.
If you tase me, I will sue.
I don't care. Go ahead.
If you tase
you gonna calm
me, I
down?
will shoot the.
You gonna shoot me?
Then it seems that the police officer took what James said as a threat and said that James was under arrest.
Put your hands up. You're under arrest.
I didn't say that.
You're under arrest.
I will shoot. I will.
10-4, I'm fixing to fight one. Don't you get in the damn car.
It then looks like the police officer uses a taser on James, although the body cam appears to fall off during the scuffle, so we can't exactly see what happened.
Get on the ground. Get on the ground.
5194 bathroom.
According to the Action News Jax article, James felt that the officer did not de-escalate the situation, and it said that they, quote, reached a $8,360 settlement with the city. A few months later, James was arrested because he was protesting on a street corner in drag over the arrest, which had happened earlier, which James felt was fraudulent. And James was reportedly arrested, this time for several charges including public intoxication, harassing a witness, and indecent exposure. However, some of these charges were later dropped, and James apparently reached a plea deal and is currently on probation. But this incident with James was apparently one of the many incidents that were detailed in a 104-page document that was sent from the city manager to the commissioners, and it detailed how the Stark Police Department was in, quote, disarray. According to the report, 2,500 pieces of evidence disappeared from the Stark Police Department over a decade, and this includes guns, drugs, and money. There was also apparently, quote, bags of sealed evidence not secured in evidence lockers, loose ammo in boxes, as well as bullets in the back of police cruisers, and uniforms that were not secured and just thrown into a room. The Stark Police Department was then reportedly defunded and shut down by a vote by the Stark City Commission. However, according to an article in WCJB, this decision was made to save money for the city, as law enforcement was then outsourced to the sheriff's office instead. However, based on the article in Action Jax News, it seems to imply that the police department may have been closed down due to the failings that were found in this 104-page report that I mentioned earlier. The journalist asked James, quote, when you heard the police department was shut down, you thought what? And James said, quote, I thought that, finally, I got them. And when asked what James's message for people is, James said, quote, stand up for yourself, know your rights, know what they can and cannot do, and don't allow anyone to silence you. James has subsequently shared a reel in an Instagram story about this news story from Action News Jax. And it appears that James is being credited, at least in some part, with helping to close down this police department which was in, quote, disarray. But for now, no other information has been given about this, so we'll have to wait and see if any further developments come out about this. So there you go, there was the Have Your Say video for All Stars 9 episodes 1 and 2. What do you think of the new All Stars format playing for charity with no eliminations? And do you think that this should be the norm for all future seasons of All Stars going forward? Let me know in the comments. And if you'd like to get early access to my videos as well as have your comments featured in my Have Your Say videos, please check out my Patreon and consider supporting me. It goes such a long way to helping support my channel and I really appreciate it. And I'll put a link to my Patreon in the description. I'd also like to say a massive thank you to all of my Patreon members who are amazing and support me every month. In the You're a Winner Baby tier we have Alan, Anna, Ashley, Bailey, Emerald1508, Ethan, Josh, Kat, Lisa, PC Smush, Rachel, Rochelle, Sam, Shelby, Shara and William. And in the Shantae You Stay tier we have Amy, Becky, Brennan, Charlie, David, Emmy, Kerry, Linda and Stephen. Thank you so much for being part of my Patreon. I really appreciate it and I really do love my Patreon community. You are all legends. If you liked this video, please remember to like and comment on the video to help tell the algorithm that this is a great video, and make sure you hit the subscribe button because it really does make such a big difference to my channel. Thank you for watching and I hope you'll join me again in future videos. Thank you, bye!